It couldn't be more different, really. If you take the last scene of Series 1, where we're having tea on the lawn at Highclere and everyone's in linen suits and looking clean and lovely, and then suddenly at the top of Series 2, we're here. Covered in mud. Cold, noisy. Pretty miserable. And this was Matthew's life for, you know, the duration of his war. This is quite a luxurious one, I suppose. We seem to have a sort of samovar or something for tea, and a stove in the corner, writing desk here. This thing here is your roll. It would double as your bed. It would roll out and be a sort of mattress. It would also contain a lot of your kit. Matthew doesn't really seem to carry this a great distance. He has his servant Davis to do that for him, and when you see Matthew returning to the trench, Davis is his sort of pack horse behind him. Generally speaking, most platoons would only spend around a week at the front line before being relieved, but I think the longest, I think the Black Watch once spent 48 days in the front line. And you just think, God, I could barely spend 48 hours there before feeling really miserable, and that was with a cup of tea every 15 minutes. It did give you a real strange sense of what it must have been like, seeing the difference between how the officers were accommodated and how the men were accommodated. And actually, when in the front line, they very often just slept on the fire step or in a what they called a dugout. It was literally a sort of dugout hole in the trench wall. It wasn't like this at all. It was incredibly authentic, and we had dead horses scattering no man's land and corpses in craters. They were real explosions. There was real stuff flying up in the air and falling on our heads. People running, guns going off. All the while, cameras rolling and everything else going on as well. It was really muddy underfoot, really, really muddy, and almost kind of locked your feet in at some point. It's easy for us to think, well, here was hell and going back home must have been lovely, and so, it's like going back to see mum and dad and, there's a fridge full of food and it's all great. But for most guys, that for the duration of the war, as long as they were in active service, it was almost easier to be here. Emotionally and psychologically, it was easier to be back here and to know what was going on, with your men. And every minute that you spent back home, while it was a physical relief and there wasn't the barrage, the physical barrage of, every evening, there was this sort of nagging sense that you should really be back out there and you should be leading your men, you should be helping to end this thing, because, they had no idea when it was going to end. Going back to Downton, seeing Mary, seeing his old life, and seeing the luxury that was relatively still being lived, although obviously they were making a few concessions, but trying to maintain this old order was a very, very strange, very strange thing for him to face and to deal with, and so I think that's what we've tried to look at in a lot of the scenes.